So right here, we have a house that I found in the SketchUp warehouse, and we're going to take a look at how we can modify it and make it completely realistic in Enscape. So right here, I'm going to have the Enscape tab opened. I'm going to open it up and just explore it a little bit for you. So it's a basic house. It will kind of have a mountainous landscape look with pine trees and all of that. But first, we're going to take a look at some other aspects of it. So what I first want to do here is that I want to go ahead and do a little bit of composition. I want to make sure that I get the angle right. That way, I already planned what I'm going to capture in the rendering. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and make the perspective to 2 point because it's just better for exterior renders, especially in our case here. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the field of view to something like 75. So we're going to make it a little bit more narrow. And then from there, I'm going to also make the rendering quality ultra. Then I'm going to go backwards a little bit. And now what we can do is I can either center the image like this, or I can also do a 1/3 composition. So if you want to make sure that you're getting the 1/3 or like the rule of thirds composition right, we can go to video editor and show grid lines. And the point of this is that we want to have the most important elements in the points where the lines intersect. So this basically divides the picture in 3 areas, vertically and horizontally, which are equal. And as I said, we want to make sure that we put the most important elements in these intersecting points. But for now, I think that I'm just going to keep this image to something like this. I'm going to center it out a little bit more. So I'm just going to keep it as a rule of thirds image. So I want to put it at something like this. I believe this would be a good composition for the image. And then out here we'll have trees, and the perspective just flows well with the composition that we have now. So in order to save this camera view, I'm going to go ahead and go to the view management's icon. And then from here, I'm just going to click create view, and I'm going to name this a rule of thirds camera, and I'm going to link it with the custom preset that we have now. Okay, so right now I'm just going to keep the Enscape tab right here. You've probably seen previously that to keep the Enscape tab on top of the modeling screen, I use a tool called TurboTop, but with the Enscape update, we don't have to do that anymore. So you can just go to the Enscape window settings, you can go to the preferences, and you can just click pin Enscape window on top of host applications. And this is useful if you only have one monitor in your disposal. I do have 2 monitors, but there's no way that I can actually screen record both of them. So I'm just going to keep the camera like this, which is going to be easier for you and for me as well. So I'm just going to make it a little bit larger. So first off, I want to change the grass material. So for the grass material, I can use material that is in the Enscape material library, and I'm going to go ahead and go to grounds, and I like to usually use the grass 04 material. I want to import it. I'm going to apply it where the grass already is in this modeling, so in the same place. But later on, I want to make a few modifications in the color that it emits, or the color that the actual grass has, because I want to make it a little bit darker, because it will be more fitting with the whole climate, or I guess the circumstances in mountainous area. Usually the grass is a little bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here. So I usually like to take care of the materials from the ground up, and that's just, it's not like a set rule or something. It's just easier for me to keep track of what I need to change and what I don't need to change. So right now I'm just going to go ahead at the grass material, and I'm just going to tone that a little bit darker, and something like this for the grass material works just fine. Over here you can see that some of the edges do not look the best, but we can fix that later on. So now I will go ahead and apply the material in these parts that weren't affected with the changes of the materials that we had previously. And now I believe we can move on to changing this gravel material. So I'm going to go ahead at the Enscape material library once again, and I'm going to go at the grounds material once again. I'm going to choose the pebbles material. I can either choose the only white one or the multicolor. I believe that using an only white pebble will look much better. So I'm going to import the selection, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it everywhere where's gravel or pebbles in our scene. So maybe the terrain doesn't look the most realistic, but we can hide it later on with a bit of vegetation, with bushes and all of that. We can kind of fix the imperfections, I guess, or maybe not even imperfections, maybe some of the errors of the modeling. We can hide them a little bit with vegetation. And you always have to keep in mind that in creating 3D renders, especially when you're going to create them professionally for a firm, or if you actually offer 3D visualization services, you want to make sure that you do the most efficient job with the modeling and all of that. I'm not saying you should cut corners, but you can definitely use some techniques to actually not waste a lot of times in unimportant stuff. For example, you don't want to waste times in things that you can do much faster in post-production. Okay, so now if you open the Enscape tab, we can see that we actually applied the pebble material. What I think would make it look a little bit better for us is if we make it just a little bit larger. So I'm going to go ahead and make the dimensions something like 130 by 130. And I'm going to go ahead in the material editor, and I'm just going to see how a change in the displacement will affect these pebbles. So I'm going to make this 2, and then I'm going to get a little bit closer to them, or maybe from the view, and I think this makes them look a little bit more realistic. However, maybe we can tone this up a little bit more, so maybe 2.8. Let's see how this affects the pebbles now, and I believe this looks quite good. They look in 3D, they have depth and all of that. We're obviously going to make changes in the lighting later on, so that will affect all of the materials as well. So right now we're just setting up a base for our render. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the metal material here in the stairs. So for this, it's quite simple actually. I'm just going to select it. I'm going to go to the Enscape material editor. As we can see, it already has some configuration done to it. What I want to do is I want to make it even darker. So if I open the Enscape tab, you can see that now it's a little bit more black. So I'm going to go ahead and use an imperfection map to try and make it look even better. So I'm going to go up close, and I'm going to go to the texture reflections, and I'm going to choose scratches as the imperfection map. So now that I have applied the scratches imperfections, I'm going to go ahead and use an explicit texture transformation. So this will make the scratches a little bit bigger, because right now they just look too small. We cannot really tell too much of them. So I'm just going to go something like 3 by 3, which seems too much. So let's just do 1 by 1. And this is a little bit better. Obviously, maybe we cannot tell it from the camera view that we have now, but I'm just letting you know that this is what I would do if I had to take an up-close shot of them, maybe use some more imperfections and maybe kind of arrange it a little bit better. That way it doesn't repeat too much. So now I'm going to go ahead and take a look on this wall. This looks like a concrete wall that was painted black, or it's a little bit darker. I'm going to go ahead and choose another material, because what is happening here is that the same material is just repeating over and over again. As you can see, all of the placement of it is just repeating, and it doesn't look very realistic. The same thing is here, and just so that it doesn't repeat itself that much, I'm going to upload another texture from the Enscape material library. I'm going to choose Concrete Panels 02, and then from this one, once it is imported, I'm going to go ahead and apply it on the walls that we have here. So now that I've applied the concrete material, I'm going to make it a lot darker, and I also want to change the size of it. So maybe let's also unlink it so it doesn't change the whole thing. Maybe I want to make it something like 150 by 80, or I mean maybe 150 by 100 would be fine, or 150 by 150 as well. Let's try to make them even bigger, so 280. I think this looks fine. I'm just gonna change, maybe make them a little bit larger vertically, so 330 for example. I'm gonna change its alignment, so I'm going to go ahead and change the positioning of it to something like this. Let's make this larger and get in. Right now it's just looking way too big, the holes of the concrete. Maybe we can change this and maybe just leave it at default. It would look fine like that as well, I think. So I'm just going to go back to the option that we have here. I'm going to go and make them darker, maybe change it and make it just a little bit bigger to something like 170. And then from here on out, we can just leave it the way it is. Maybe over here, I want to change the positioning just so it doesn't repeat too much over the windows. Maybe I go ahead and select the texture like this. I right click it, go to texture, go to positioning, and just move it a little bit upwards. I'm going to select this one and apply it onto this wall as well to actually be aligned in all places the same way. And now I'm going to make it even darker, and something like this is a better replacement for what we had earlier. Now I'm going to go ahead and change this plaster material as well, because it's the same issue that we had earlier. I'm going to go ahead right here. I'm going to go ahead and choose the plaster materials. I'm going to choose maybe stucco, the plaster 10, and I'm going to apply it on the wall that we have here. So I'm just going to apply it like this and make it a little bit closer to white color. And then I'm going to go ahead and choose the metallic finishing and make it darker. So something like this. And now the materials on our house do look a little bit better. I want to also make sure that I do some changes on the window material as well as the fences. And then I'm going to take a look at this inner wood material. I want to actually make it not gray, but actual darker wood color. So I'm going to get closer right here, and I'm going to go to the Enscape material editor, and I'm going to choose the window material right here. I'm going to tune up the metallic slider at 100%, and I'm going to make the roughness at 30%. This way it actually looks closer to a metallic material, and I believe the window frames look just a little bit better now. I would also like to change the material on the garage doors that we have here. Maybe leave the texture as it is, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just go ahead right here and just make them totally white, because I believe they would look better here. And I can change the color to something a little bit like this. Let me check. They do have the metallic slider turned on, which is not ideal. Let me check if this will look better. Now this is too white, so I'm gonna make it a little bit more gray, maybe more like this. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. But what I definitely want to change in this exterior material is this wood material right here. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the Enscape material library once again. I'm trying to use as much materials from the Enscape material library as possible. That way you do not have to source them online, and we all have them at one place. You can find them easier if you want to follow along with the video. So now I'm going to go ahead and find some wooden exterior planks. So I'm going to choose this wood, and I'm going to try and apply it to these facade. I'm just going to try and see how it will look like in this color. So I'm going to choose all of these, and I'm going to explode them. I will apply it, and now I will make all of these a group. So as you can see, I believe this kind of gives it a better look, because it kind of gives some warmth to the building. The gray color just makes it look very cold, and it doesn't fit very well with the scene. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing with this other area as well. I'm gonna explode it, and I'm gonna apply another wood material, and then I will do the same thing for the second floor. I'm gonna select it, click explode once again, apply the material, make it a group. So all of these are grouped at the same time, so something like this. So now I'm going to go back to the Enscape window, and I'm going to go to the camera view that we had earlier. So another thing that I want to take care of is the glass reflection. So I'm going to choose the glass material that we have. I want to make it a little bit more specular. That way it kind of reflects more. And then other than that, everything looks fine in as far as the glass goes. So for now, we're going to move on a little bit on the lighting, and then we're going to move on to the surroundings and all of that. Something that I can see that we missed also is the asphalt material that we have here in the ground section. I'm going to go ahead and choose roads, and then from here I'm going to choose the material that we have here. I'm going to import it, and then I'm just going to apply it on the section that we have here. So I've selected the surface. Now I'm just going to apply it on top. Now I just need to kind of make the arrangement a little bit better. That way we cannot really see the division between the lines that we had earlier, and I believe this material looks much more realistic than the one that we had previously. Now I'm going to go ahead, as I said, I'm going to move on to lighting. We're going to add an HDRI. So I'm going to go ahead in the horizon section, source, I'm going to do skybox, and then I'm going to load from file one of the HDRIs that I have in my disposal in the computer. I download all the HDRIs from polyhaven.com, so make sure you check that out if you want to actually get some of your own HDRIs. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, just make sure that it's just what I use in my day-to-day work, and I want to make sure that you kind of get the best quality possible, or at least what I believe is the best quality possible. So for this one, I'm going to try the midday one and see how it will look. I'm going to turn the sun brightness all the way down to maybe 8%, something like this. I mean, this doesn't look that bad. I want to also make sure that I choose the brightest point as sun direction, and then let's just change the sun direction to something like this. And I believe this makes a huge difference in the rendering that we have here. Now, what I also want to make sure is that the scene kind of matches what we're trying to go for. Now, what I also want to make sure is that the HDRI matches what we are trying to go for here, which is basically kind of a mountainous area. So I believe I'm going to leave the HDRI like this as of now, and we're going to move on to a little bit of landscaping. So first thing that I want to do is I want to do some multi-asset placement, or at least the feature that Enscape has, and I want to apply some pine trees around the area that we have. So I'm going to go to the multi-asset placement tool, and I'm going to choose the bucket tool, and then from here I'm going to choose the category of vegetation, and I'm going to go to trees. So once I'm at trees, I'm going to choose a few pine trees that we have as part of the Enscape library. I just chose a bunch of them. I'm going to apply them in this area, and I want to make the density a little bit more, and the distribution will be random and all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to preview selected area. Let's just see how this will look from the angle that we have. So I'm just going to click confirm placement. apply changes, and I'm gonna go to the camera angle that we had earlier. I mean, this looks fine. The only issue that I have here is that I want to have some taller trees in the back there as well, and I want to also hide this part a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna go to the SketchUp window, and I'm gonna take off all of these trees. That way we don't take any computer power that we don't actually need, because we're not gonna take an angle from this render. So we're just gonna leave the ones that we have right here. Maybe we needed those ones, so I'm just gonna leave those ones. I'm gonna choose this one and take it off, and now I'm just gonna choose all of these trees. I want to make them larger, and I'm gonna move them back now, that way they don't intersect with what we have going on here. Maybe move them a little bit on that way, and maybe move them a little bit down, so something like this. So let's just make this big once again, and I want to cover this part with some other kind of vegetation, because I like how these trees kind of don't have a very formal or like a perfect kind of way that they grew, and I like this detail, so I'm gonna keep it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and apply some vegetation from the asset library that we have from the Enscape toolbar in SketchUp. I'm gonna go ahead to the vegetation part, or the vegetation section, and I'm gonna choose some bushes, so something like this. Maybe I can also use the multi-asset placement tool for this one as well. So let me just go ahead once again with a multi-asset placement tool. I'm going to go ahead and add the vegetation. This time at the tags, we're going to choose the bush tag. So I'm going to choose these ones. This one, I want to choose some more raw ones, maybe a few like colorful ones. This one could fit fine as well. Something like this. I'm just choosing random ones, and I'm not giving too much thought on the vegetation that I'm choosing. Maybe we could have kind of went in deeper on what kind of vegetation we want to choose, but for now I just want to choose something that I believe would look fine with our scene. So I'm just going to choose a few of them like this. So I'm going to apply what we had earlier here. I'm going to click confirm placement. I'm going to click this one as well. I'm going to do the same thing for this area. I'm going to do the same thing for this area and for the part that we have here as well. Confirm placement, apply changes, and let's get back to the view that we had here. Now, I like the fact that this looks like raw. It doesn't look very handpicked from actual humans, the landscape and all that. So I'm going to keep it like that. But one thing that I do not like is the part that we can kind of see the background of the HDRI, and it's giving out that we don't actually have real trees back there, but it's an HDRI, because we can see the difference between the trees that are placed from the Enscape Assets Library and the HDRI itself. So I'm going to close this down a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead in the 3D warehouse, and I'm going to choose something like mountain terrain. I'm going to go to models. Maybe I would choose something like this one, and then I'm going to keep it close to the part that we have here. So let me just get this where I need it to be. So this model is just way too large, so we're just gonna make it a lot smaller, and I'm gonna rotate it. That way it aligns up perfectly with what we have over here. So I will rotate it like this, as I said earlier, and then I will choose this part, and I will align it just as I said here. And then I will choose the grass material that we had, and I will apply it on this whole modeling that we have here. Now, we can tell that there's actual landscape over there. Now I'm just going to do the multi-asset placement tool on this part as well, to maybe give it even a bigger boost of realism. This might take a lot of computing power for the computer, but I believe it will be worth it, because it would just fill up the whole scene with what we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose vegetation once again, and I'm going to go to the tree tag list that we had earlier. I'm going to choose some of the pine trees that we had in the previous selection. Let's turn down the density of it, that way we do not take as much computing power as it was actually taking previously. I'm going to wait until they actually apply on the whole area, and I'm going to click confirm placement, apply changes, and I'm going to wait until they all load up in the file that we had here. And once, as you can see, we can already preview them, we're going to go ahead in the actual composition that we had earlier, and as you can see, it actually does look like there is a forest out there. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add some kind of bushes in the front part that we have here that our composition catches. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead first with the multi-asset placement tool, like we did previously. I'm going to go ahead and choose the category of vegetation, and then I will choose the tags for the bushes, and I'll select the same ones or kind of the similar ones that we did earlier. So some of these, some colorful ones, a bigger one like that, and something like this too. So now I want to go back to the composition angle we had earlier. I'm gonna select some of the bushes that we had here, and I'm gonna copy them on this part, and I'm going to rotate them to something like this, and then move them just like we need them in the composition, maybe a little bit closer even, and just like that. I'm gonna take this off, and I will choose just a little bit of more variety of vegetation at the front. And now I'm gonna go ahead and choose a different type of bush. So I'm gonna choose this feather grass. I'm gonna keep it closer here at something like this. I want to keep it a little bit more onto the corner of the composition, maybe a little bit more to the front. I'm also gonna choose one of these on the side to help with the composition of what I'm trying to do. And then I want to choose a larger one, which will be taller than all of these two ones. So I'm gonna go scroll down in the asset library. Actually, while I'm here, I want to choose something like this. So maybe a smaller tree that will actually look like it was planted by people at this area right here. And then we will add some bushes around this. But I actually don't like this one. It has very bright color of leaves. So maybe this one is a little bit better. And then we're going to add some bushes around it. So I'm just going to do it right now while we're at it. I'm going to choose them from the actual area that we had here. I'm going to copy them, move them a little bit closer, and then downwards. So something like this works fine for what I was trying to achieve here. Now let's go back to what we were actually searching for in the asset library. So just a quick tip: if your assets take a very long time to load, like they sometimes do with my computer, you can always use the offline asset library, which I haven't activated as of now because I have a new computer and I haven't taken the time to actually do it. You can always download it in your computer, and then they will load up from your drive rather than from searching online in the cloud server of Enscape or wherever they actually store all of these assets. So make sure you actually do that. I'm just not going to do that as of now because I'm in the middle of the video and that kind of takes a lot of time and I don't want to waste it. But the good thing about it is that once you do it, you don't have to go back and do it again. Okay, so let's just choose these stones and then rotate them around, maybe something like this. I'm gonna add some of these stones over here as well. I'm gonna make them a little bit smaller because right now it's just looking way out of proportion. Let's keep the Enscape tab on top as we had earlier. Now I want to actually make this bush a lot smaller because it's just taking way too much attention, of which I don't want that to happen. And I'm going to choose the composition once again. I'm going to make sure that is the one that we have right now. But what I definitely want to do is I definitely want to make these ones larger. And then I'm going to add just another one. So I'm going to choose this one, the pampas grass, and I want to make it larger. So something like this, and move it a little bit backwards actually. And what I want to do with this is that I'm actually going to go ahead and use a depth of field tool to actually make the composition even better. So I'm going to go ahead, add the visual settings. I'm going to turn on the depth of field at something like 25%, and I'm going to take off autofocus, and I want it to use the focal point. So what the focal point option does, as you can see right here, will appear a white line that moves, and this basically will detect manually where we want the actual image to focus on. But I think the depth of field is just too high right now, so I'm just going to do 17%. And maybe this works a little bit better. Now, something that would also help is if we had a little bit of fog. I rarely ever use the fog option in Enscape, but I'm going to check it out and see if it's going to work fine in the options that we need here. So I definitely want to make the background a little bit foggier over there, and I think this works quite well. So let's just keep it at something like this. Right now the composition is looking quite good for the image that we had here, but we'll definitely take a little bit more time on working with the whole image. So I want to try and add a vehicle here, and maybe someone walking upstairs, and then maybe some plants on the balcony or even here on the side, and just a few touches to kind of finalize the image that we have going on. So let's go ahead and go to the Enscape asset library. We're going to choose vehicles, and then from the vehicles options, we're going to scroll down, and I'm going to try and find a car that actually matches with the house. So a lot of time, I think I mentioned this earlier in one of my videos, a lot of time I see a lot of people kind of going for simple houses, and they put an extravagant car in front of it and it just doesn't match with the scene. I know it might not look like it makes a huge difference, but believe me, it just looks weird when you're adding like a Lambo in front of a simple cottage house or something like that. So or at least maybe that's just my opinion. So I want to add something maybe a little bit not too simple, but definitely not something like this. But let's just go ahead and choose let's just try this SUV, this Audi. So I'm gonna rotate it like this and move it on this side and maybe backwards. Let's just see how it's looking as of now. I do not like the material. I think it's just way too reflective and it doesn't look very realistic. Let me try and find a car with another color applied to it. I think there's a, let me try this Porsche in front of the house. You can never go wrong with these cars. So I'm just gonna go and rotate it something like this, and I believe this goes well. So let's just make it a little bit better aligned with the garage, and I'm just gonna leave the car something like that. So let me just check if the changes that we had previously in the materials affected the actual fences. So I'm going to choose the fence right here, and as you can see, there was no effect on that, so this can make a difference as well. Let's check the fences on the stairs here as well. Okay, so these ones actually have the changes applied to it. I also want to make sure that there's a little bit more reflection on the garage door, so I'm going to go to the Enscape material editor once again, and I'm going to choose this one, and then let's just do to something like 40%, and I think they will look better now. I will also try and add a person walking upstairs. So there's a category for walking people only, and I believe people in motion have a better effect to the rendering rather than static people. So I'm just gonna choose maybe this one. I'm gonna go something like this, and then I will rotate it on the other side. That way it actually looks like he's going inside the house rather than going outside. He kind of looks like he's floating with his front leg. Maybe we can change the angle to something like this. That way it looks a little bit more believable. Or did we actually mess it up? Or am I actually overthinking it? I'm not sure. But we'll leave it like that as of now. Or what we can do is we can actually leave it on top of the stairs, and it will look like it's going inside the entrance. So let's just rotate it once again like this. But now I think the rotation went on the other side, and it looks like now it looks like he's falling down the stairs. So I'm just gonna take it back to the default settings, and yeah, maybe a little bit more to the left as well, because of that grass that is blocking the image. Okay, so I think it looks all right as of now. It kind of has a morning look on the render. I really like where this image is going. Something that I definitely like to add is maybe some tree, some plant here, and then other than that, we're just gonna add a few final touches in the visual settings, and we're gonna check what else we will need for this render after that. So I'm just gonna choose, this tree for the actual balcony. I think this looks all right. It looks a little bit more natural, and the other ones, I think a lot of them were interior plants. And then I'm not sure, but maybe some exterior lights would look good over here, but I'm just gonna leave it like this, I think, in terms of the changes in the exterior and the modeling of all of them. So now I will move on to some visual settings, and this might be the final step during this image. So the exposure seems fine as of now. The auto exposure will be turned on. The depth of field and all of this other stuff we took care earlier. Auto contrast, I'm gonna leave auto contrast on. And on the saturation, I wanna turn it up a little bit. I always like to turn up the saturation in Enscape because I believe colors sometimes look just way too, they don't look saturated enough basically. And I want to make it a little bit warmer as well. And so now I believe the image looks better than previously. And then all of these other effects, we don't need them. I'm gonna leave only the vignette, and all of that will be taken away. Now I believe the image has way too much contrast for some reason. So I'm gonna turn the highlights on and the shadows a bit off. So I'm gonna leave it like this. And then for atmosphere, I think the sun was good enough at 8%. I'm not even going to touch that because I believe it was the perfect setting for this angle. The night sky brightness, we're not going to take care of that because we don't need that for this. The shadow sharpness, I want them as soft as possible because we're going for a morning look here. The ambient brightness is not gonna make much difference for an exterior render and all of that. So all of these settings look pretty much fine. I'm gonna go to the output and I'm gonna choose Ultra HD for the output, and I think this is pretty much it for this render in Enscape. I'm gonna go back to the saturation and maybe tone it down to 103 because I believe that was just way too much now that I was taking a second look to it. And maybe I want to actually turn on the depth of field a little bit, so something like this, and I believe this works fine. Okay, so this is the final image that we actually got from this video. Let me know what you would make better and what you would change. Obviously, I just had to go through some of the strongest points. Maybe this is not the most realistic and maybe it could have been done even better. But if I was you, I wouldn't waste any more time and I would just go straight into the description and click the first link and join the Enscape Expert program. This was a tutorial for more on exterior renders. If you want to see a full walkthrough for interior renders, make sure you watch the video right here.